Yeah, we don't grow spiritually when everything's going good. When we're blind and we're wondering what the future's gonna, that's when we're in that pain, that emotional pain and anxiety. It's when we grow spiritually. It changed me, Raymond. I can't even describe it. And everybody around me, all the guys that I'm working with, all the meetings I go to, everybody's like, they know I'm a little bit different somehow.
Hello, this is Raymond Aaron, New York Times top 10 bestselling author, bringing you Respark Your Life podcast, the world's premier podcast to ignite the fire to allow you to live life on your own terms. Every single Thursday, I bring you a multi-millionaire, world-famous celebrity to teach you about the most fascinating ways in order to live a far better life. Every single Thursday, you just need to subscribe by hitting the subscribe button. I'll see you every Thursday to respark your life. Yes, another episode, but this one is about a spiritual passage. Yes, that's the name of this episode, the name of this interview, a spiritual passage. So my guest today is Rand Timmerman. He's a retired lawyer and a recovered alcoholic, thankfully, and he hiked the amazing Appalachian Trail at age 72 with his younger brother, who is age 71, and then wrote a book with 500 pictures in it called A Spiritual Passage. So that's the name of this episode, and it's also the name of his book, describing the difficulties and the problems they encountered doing such an arduous hike, especially at their age, dealing with issues of grief and overcoming addiction. It's very inspiring and spiritual. It's amazing. But why am I telling you? Rand will tell you. Rand, welcome.
Thank you, Raymond. Great to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
So I want to go back in the past first. When you were a lawyer, did you feel some spiritual unfulfillment? Like, were you just working for money, but you were like empty inside? Is that why you did this spiritual passage after you retired?
Yes, that's a very insightful question. Yeah, I did. But, I was driven. My brother and I grew up in absolute poverty. Our father was a Mustang pilot during World War II. My mother was engaged to a soldier who died on Omaha Beach on D-Day, or I wouldn't be here. And my father came back and they fell in love and had me and my brother. And then my dad got polio. And people don't realize how devastating polio was back in the 40s and early 50s. He had two cousins that got it and died the same day.
Whoa.
Yeah, so there was something in our gene pool, Raymond, that was not good. My dad made it into a children's hospital in Utica, New York, and spent 8 months in an iron lung. I can't imagine and he was there a year, and I can't imagine what the medical bills were. They never talked about it. But so we were consigned to poverty, and I was very driven to get out of that. I was hunting and trapping and working on farms at like 12 years old, driving tractors. And in a way, it was kind of good for me. I had an amazing childhood, fair amount of independence, hard work. And but I always wanted to be successful. And then, of course, I went off to the war. My brother was always a spiritual man. He was very involved in the church as a kid. My mom was into that, the Baptist church, Adams, New York. But I wasn't. And then when I got to Vietnam, whatever vestiges of some spiritual belief were just dashed in a heartbeat. That first battle, and I saw men dying and that I felt were better men than me, and, that whole survivor thing. But I was very successful after the war. I became a JAG officer in the United States Marine Corps without a college degree.
Wow.
Which was very much a fluke, but I had a guardian angel. So that led me on a legal career. And I had a really good career. I was, self-employed for 40 years and people working for me. I was the first lawyer to ever interview, cross-examine on the stand the director of the FBI lab in 1988, contesting the issue of DNA because it was all circumstantial evidence and they used DNA for one of the first times. And when I subpoenaed her, when she showed up at the courthouse in Lowville, New York, 1,500 people in a county with 30,000 and more cows than people. I mean, we're out there, right? And And I was a very nice lady. I'm talking to her and I said, well, how many times have you been subpoenaed? And she said, this is the first time.
Really?
Yes. So I had a great career. That was a murder trial. I was on TV and in the local paper and stuff like that. And so my career took off, but I also knew that alcohol was going to be a problem for me someday. That first time at 13 years old when I drank and I'm wearing clothes that people wore out and I got acne and my esteem level is like zero, right? And that first time I drank, I turned into Clint Eastwood.
Wow.
You know who Clint Eastwood is, right?
Sure do, yeah.
Yeah. Well, the other generations behind us, they have no clue. The kids in their 30s and 40s, and you and I are both in our 80s now, right?
That's right.
Yeah, they don't know, but oh my God, that first time I went from 5'8", covered with acne, to a movie star, 6'4", handsome, powerful, sexy, funny, everything I always wanted to be.
One drink of alcohol can do that to you.
Oh my God, Raymond. But the good news was I confronted my father and I had a little talk about it the next day. The kid that went with me, I weighed 100 pounds. The kid that across the street went with me weighed 200 pounds. And I told my dad, because I knew he was going to find out probably, so protect myself. And I stood way back when I told him, because you never knew. With the polio and being crippled his whole adult life, he had a very low threshold of emotional pain that he could take.
Right.
And you never knew how he was going to react, but sometimes it could be pretty dramatic and quick. But he said, well, Butch, just don't do that again. And David's in the hospital. I knew it affected me differently. I mean, I got drunker than a skunk. We crawled home, but I didn't throw up. I didn't have a headache. I just knew it. And I made a conscious decision, Raymond, that I was never going to do drugs. And I never did.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. So that was the good side of it. But eventually, in my late 50s, early 60s, it did become a factor. And that drove me to my spiritual passage. Before that, I don't know. If you don't believe in a higher power, you probably think you're God. Now, I tried to be a humble man and think of myself that way, but truth was, I look back on it. Yeah, I did kind of think I was God in a way, that I could control my little world and make things come out the way I wanted to. And I did very well for a long time. I ran 26 marathons. I did all kinds of stuff.
Wow.
Yeah. And my brother was the same way. We were both pretty good shape for 70-year-olds when we went on this adventure, that's for sure.
So you had the positive that you were a very successful lawyer, and the negative that your father had polio and that there was death in your family and that you were an alcoholic. And so with all that jumbled up background, you retired and went on the Appalachian Trail. But most people don't know about it. How tough is it? How long is it? Where is it?
It goes from Springer Mountain, Georgia to the top of Maine. It's 2,200 miles. It's the longest footpath trail only in the whole world.
2,200 miles.
Goes over 600 mountains. It has 465,000 feet of elevation changes. So that's 500,000 feet of up and down, which is what you're doing almost all the time. And it's mostly rocks. And there's all kinds of critters, and there's lots of pictures in there of bears and snakes and all kinds of stuff. It was the most wonderful, most difficult adventure I ever went on when nobody was shooting at me. When people are shooting at you, that's a different ball game.
Rand, how long did it take you?
It took about 9 months altogether.
Wow.
I only did 1,863 miles. I fell down a rock slide on Wilcox Mountain in Massachusetts and really messed up my hip bad. I didn't realize how bad it was. I would have died except for the fact that my foot got caught between two rocks as I'm somersaulting down this mountain, this rock slide. And that saved my life, but it really banged the crap out of me. And the next morning, I had to walk 9 more miles to get out of there. And that was very difficult. But the pain went from unbearable to kind of like a wicked ache. It was one of those deals where if you get moving again, it's kind of like combat. You learn just to keep moving and do what you got to do. But the next morning, I couldn't move. So we actually went off the trail for a month. And then my brother called me and said, how you doing? I said, I'm all right. I didn't get any medical treatment, which I should have.
Oh, wow.
I just started walking again. I waited a couple of days and started walking again. And he said, you want to try to finish it? And I said, sure. But we got north of Washington Mountain in New Hampshire in the Whites. The Whites are the hardest by far. That's a whole different world up there. And I did Moosalok, and then I did Wolf Mountain, and then we were going to go back and do Washington Mountain because they had closed it because it snowed in July.
Oh, no.
It snows up there every month. That's the mountain where we have the highest recorded wind speeds in North America, 246 miles an hour, I think it is. So Ronnie finished it with his brother, and he went over the top of Washington.
So we now know in the physical universe how rugged it was, but now tell us in the spiritual universe, what were your realizations? How was it a spiritual passage for you?
For me, I had done a 12-step program for alcoholics who like to remain anonymous, and had a really good sponsor. And then I started sponsoring guys. And in order to overcome disease, we believe that you have to have a higher power. I fought alcohol, Raymond, like it was a tiger, but it kept beating the crap. I couldn't understand why I couldn't control it anymore, and I would end up in the hospital on suicide watches, not even knowing what had happened. It was some of my old demons came back, and it all got magnified in a very bad way. And I actually retired because I had a great career and I didn't want to destroy that completely. And then once I had completed, I did make a connection with a higher power outside of me. And I came to believe there was a higher power. Ren's not it. And that power wants me to not drink alcohol. That's what God's will is for Rand. And once I accepted that, I could take that willpower that's pretty powerful that I've always had and align it with God's will. I don't drink alcohol, and it worked out for me. And then I started trying to help other men, do the same program. And so I was 4 years sober when I went on the hike with Ronnie. So why did we go on the hike, Raymond? It was Ronnie's idea. Ronnie came back from the Vietnam War, and our mother's best friend was a lady named Edie, who was 14 years older than Ron. And on their first date, she brought her 3 youngest of 7 children.
On their first date. Oh my God.
They fell madly in love pretty quickly. Those kids became Ron's kids. She had a massive stroke in 2011 and ended up in a wheelchair. And unfortunately, she was one of those people that didn't get better. Mini strokes plagued her to the end. So she lived 6 years after that. Ronnie took great care of her. When she passed, she left him with 7 kids, 27 grandchildren, and 27 great-grandchildren.
Goodness.
Yeah, because they got involved in the Mormon church. My brother was always spiritual. I asked him about that on the hike, and he never lost his like I did in Vietnam. He maintained that. And then when he got involved in the Mormon church, they ended up moving to Utah after the kids were growing up. But when Edie died, I talked to him on the phone. I could tell he was really bummed. The sadness and grief was way more than he thought he was going to experience. And I asked him on the phone what he was going to do. And he said, well, I'm thinking about hiking the Appalachian Trail. So anyway, I decided to go out and hang out with him and see what I could do maybe to help him out a little bit. And I got out there and we're walking in the desert outside of St. George where he lived, and beautiful in the canyons and everything. We went on a long hike. And I said, what are you going to do? And he said, I'm going to hike the Appalachian Trail. I said, that's insane, bro. There's no way. Men in our 70s, not possible. But turned out he had done a lot of studying. He bought a lot of gear. He had the maps. He knew what he was doing, kind of. And I said, well, what are you going to do? How are you going to? He said, I'm going to take the bus to Springer Mountain, Georgia, and start walking. Because, see, that's the military mentality, right? Wow. Just do it, man. And I said, well, that's not a good plan. I'll go with you.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say that you were an alcoholic, but partway through this amazing walk, you, found God or found enlightenment, and you stopped drinking. But you told me that you had already stopped years before the walk.
Yeah, I did. But here's the thing. My concept of my higher power was very limited. I believed in a higher power. I believed that it was in me, and it was, outside and bigger than me, obviously, and it could take away my difficulties with alcohol and some of my other difficulties too, like the demons from the war and stuff like that.
Right.
And I started working with other men, and that was certainly spiritual in nature.
Yes.
You see men go from total devastation to being the men that God always wanted them to be.
Wow.
I began to see that process. But my God was pretty limited in a way. And when we were in the moment for me, I'm standing on the mountain on the east side of the Hudson River. So I'm in New York State, and it's early in the morning, and I always left right at daybreak to start walking because I'm pretty slow. I had an artificial knee. Now I hadn't fallen yet, but my right leg's shorter than my left leg. So I like to brag. I was the limpiest man that ever hiked the Appalachian Trail. And I'm standing on top of this mountain, and I'm praying to that God that's keeping me sober and helping me with my other problems and my bad knees and all that stuff. And I'm looking around, and all of a sudden I realize that in God's eyes, I am the only living person in the universe. I'm standing on a mountain in New York State. There are millions of people all around me, right? Down in the valleys and everything. And there is no sign of human life, human existence. And I'm communicating with this higher power. And there's raptors flying around me like angels. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so amazing. And my God just got bigger, bigger, and bigger. And I'm looking out and I see New York City. I can see the top of some skyscrapers.
Uh-huh.
And that's it. And I'm like, oh, I'm not here by myself. I'm actually a part of the human, It was just, and from that point out, eventually my God got to be 15 billion years of spirituality. The power that created us 15 billion years ago, it's got 15 billion years of experience, knowledge, and wisdom that I'm 80 years old. There's no comparison, right?
Right.
By making my concept of my higher power much bigger, it makes it a lot easier. I went blind for 2 months recently.
What?
I went blind in one day. I didn't know that was a thing. Christmas Eve day last year, December 24th, I'm with my daughter and 4 grandkids and my wife, and I went blind in one day. I ended up having an operation January 15th. Took another month or so. So I was basically blind for 2 months. Right?
Wow.
Yeah. But I never thought I'm in a home with alcohol in it by myself. I never once thought about a drink. Guys were picking me up, taking me to meetings. I was working with men on the phone or directly, sometimes face to face. And I never even thought, that's the power of having a relationship with a higher power.
Yes.
That is, when it's the whole universe, I can say, hey, you got this, man. I have no idea how this is going to turn out, but I trust you. I have faith in you. You've taken care of me this far. You saved me from that falling out of that helicopter in Vietnam at 2,000 feet. And the other gunner hit me just at the very last second and knocked me onto the skid. You know when they talk about you can see your whole life in a second?
Yes.
That's true, Raymond.
Wow.
I don't know how that works, but it's true. I'm like, oh my God. But my life has been amazing, and my concept of my higher power changed on the trail big time. And Ronnie, and I had another experience where I almost died one night. I got in a really bad situation on a very narrow ridge in a terrible storm, and I should have been blown off the mountain, and I managed to survive that with God's help. My brother said, were you holding on to the rods of the tent? I said, hell no. I was pushing down with my feet and hands on the stakes as hard as I could, because if they came out of the ground, I'm gone. I'm blown off that mountain. Nobody will ever find me. They'll never know what happened to me. That's the way the Appalachian Trail is. There's a million places where you can disappear.
Wow.
Yeah.
Rand, that's amazing. You've been associated with near-death experiences, with death, with polio, with alcohol, with war, with blindness, and you've come through it. And you had basically no spiritual experience as a youth, and then it developed, and now you have a huge spiritual experience.
Exactly.
And you probably had to have all those, quote, negative events occur in your life in order for you to find where you are now.
That's true. Yeah, we don't grow spiritually when everything's going good. When we're blind and we're wondering what the future's going to, that's when we're in that pain, that emotional pain and anxiety. That's when we grow spiritually. It changed me, Raymond. I can't even describe it. It changed. And everybody around me, all the guys that I'm working with, all the meetings I go to, everybody's like, they know I'm a little bit different somehow.
A lot different.
Yeah. More humble.
Yes.
I was already pretty humble and more grateful. My
Yes.
gratitude is unbelievable. Gratitude is an action thing, right? Yeah, we have to take that and run with it.
You have to do gratitude and you have to be gratitude.
Yep, right, exactly. You got it.
And now I'm going to command subscribers to buy your book, A Spiritual Passage by Rand Timmerman. A Spiritual Passage. Wow. Rand,
Wow.
Thank you for bearing your soul to our subscriber and showing them all the negative events that you had to go through, all the trials and tribulations and death and near death and war, illness and blindness and polio, goodness gracious, in order to arrive where you are. And I know that everyone is saying, I want to arrive at that place, but I don't want to go through all those troubles. There's a funny expression, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. Right? You have to go through the hard times in order to get the spiritual awareness.
Yeah, I just hope I don't come back as a worm.
Oh, no. As far as I know, you come back higher. You come back better.
I'd like to be a raptor. An eagle would be fun, maybe. They mate for life, so it could be cool.
Yes, that is very nice. Yeah, so congratulations. You've told us a wonderful story, a very, very uplifting story. Buy his book. Thank you, Rand.
Thank you, Raymond, very much.
Wow, I sure hope you enjoyed that fascinating episode. Please make sure you've subscribed, and please tell your friends, if you like it, that they will probably like it as well. For your information, this experience, this service, this podcast has been sponsored by the Orbit Coaching Program. All of my friends, all my world-famous speaker friends, all have coaching programs. Mine has been independently rated as the #1 high-level coaching program. You cannot purchase it. You have to audition for it by me personally. If you're interested, please email me at respark@aaron.com. Respark@AARON. Say that you're interested in being considered for the Orbit Coaching Program and include your cell phone number so that I personally will call you back.